Okay, hi everyone. I'm Adam Berzin from MSDW, and I want to thank you for joining today's session presented by our friends at Coffee and Done. So before we get started, I just want to highlight two things. The first is that if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and our presenter, Kirkland, will get back to you via email after the session ends. The second thing is that we are recording the session, and we should have it up on MSDW within the next day or so. So without further delay, Kirkland, I am going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, well, hello everyone. I'll start with introductions. My name is Kirkland Schusler. I'm a senior solutions consultant at Coffee and Done. I specialize in marketing automation, but even more specifically, end-to-end event management in Dynamics 365 customer insights journeys. So first, a few notables about Coffee and Done. We are a connected experience partner providing advisory, technology, and operations services. We help companies large and small, from sports teams looking to improve ticket sales, nonprofits looking to increase membership, as well as global customers looking to align their sales and marketing organizations to improve their retention. Okay, so for today, my goal is to make hosting events feel manageable and possibly even enjoyable with CIJ. We'll go end to end, including planning, registration, communications, day of check-in, and follow-up. So I know that managing events can be complex. You're orchestrating sessions, speakers, capacities, registration, confirmations, reminders, and post-event journeys. And it all has to feel seamless to the registrants. And it isn't just about content. You have to think like an event planner and a marketing manager. You're crafting the narrative and ensuring every touch point before, during, and after supports the experience and your conversion goals. So common challenges we see repeatedly with events are siloed tools. No one wants the post-event job of compiling 5 printed Excel check-in spreadsheets into one. Registration chaos. There's a lot to think about here, and we want to iron out all of the details before registrations start rolling in. And manual communications. With these, one small change in the event means a long list of updates across assets, and that can be very time-consuming. So the obvious answer is to start planning early. But we won't just leave you with that. It's not our only tip. We have a few more tips when it comes to hosting events. So like I said, start early, yes, but more importantly, unify. You want a single approach that connects registration, real-time engagement, check-in, and post-event follow-up. And that's where CIJ really shines. It brings structure, automation, and intelligence to the most complex parts of your event marketing. So to start with registration, with CIJ, you can easily create an event form and every submission flows right into Dynamics. No spreadsheets, no manual reconciliation. You can build your registration form with the WYSIWYG designer. It's responsive and brandable, and you can even embed it on your website or host it on CI infrastructure. Now with CIJ event registration forms, you can use dynamic content so that updates live on the event record and they're not just hard-coded on the form. If you have to change the location or time or the description, you just update it once on the event record and the form reflects it automatically. And then my favorite part of event registration forms in CIJ is that if you build out a form that fits the needs of multiple events, you can use it for all of those events. There's no need to have multiple registration forms. Okay, so now let's talk about the content of the form. You can see from the form structure in our example that you'll first want to include the basic contact fields of your choice. And remember, because the form writes to Dataverse, each submission creates or updates a contact in the CRM. Now, the pre-fill feature on forms means that if someone clicks the register link in an invite email, the form will pre-fill with whatever contact information is currently in the CRM. This feature reduces typos, speeds up completion, and lets people correct their own data on the fly. When it comes to contact information, be very cautious of adding too many fields. I know it's tempting to get as much data into your CRM as possible at a touch point like this, but you don't want to cause fatigue and frustration or have people leave the form before finishing registration because it's too much work. So just think, does a registration for a virtual event really need to provide a full mailing address? Probably not. So the next part of the form structure is custom registration questions. And these are specific to the event registration itself. Think things like dietary restrictions or t-shirt size. These fields are accessible via the event registrations and are not mapped directly to the contact record. And then finally, we always recommend adding consent fields for marketing permissions at the bottom of your form. Okay, in CIJ, communications are built from 3 components. The first is the audience, which can be a segment or a trigger. The second is the message, which in this case will be email. And the third is the journey that kind of takes those 2 things and puts them together. So we suggest thinking of your event comms in 3 stages. The first is invitations. Invitation audiences are most likely going to be compiled using segments that leverage both profile attributes and or engagement data. Invitation emails should use dynamic content to pull event details such as date, time, venue directly from the event record. And just like with forms, if you update once on the event, that update flows everywhere it's dynamically populated, including all of these emails. So for a simple event invitations journey, we recommend 2 to 3 invitation emails. And don't forget the registration created trigger as your exit conditions in this journey, so that once someone registers, they stop getting invites. And now when it comes to the timing between invites, you can either be date specific or relative with your wait steps. My rule of thumb is that if my segment could have people joining after the initial wave or the first send, then I use relative instead of date specific wait conditions to avoid someone receiving multiple emails at once. But if your invitations include specific dates, so think a subject line of registration closes in 1 week, you'll want to send those emails on specific dates to avoid confusion. So a dated wait step tile is much better than a relative date wait step tile in that condition. So step 2 or stage 2 of communications are registered communications. Even if you don't have all of your registered content ready when registration opens, you always need, at the very least, a trigger-based journey that is sending a confirmation email immediately after registering. And this should be set up and live before registrations open, since it's trigger-based. We call that the confirmation email. And for the confirmation email, at the least, include basic information such as date, time, location, and the add to calendar function. If your event is a ways out, I would recommend keeping the content to that and pretty much as simple as possible to allow you to finalize and iron out information before providing it to registrants. But if you do have the content and it's confirmed, add staggered reminders into that same trigger-based journey. And these are where you'd include things like more detailed logistics, maps, parking information, frequently asked questions, etc. At the very least, I recommend 1 additional registered reminder email between 1 to 3 days before the event if it's in person, and 1 day or day of if it's a virtual event, just to remind people that they have registered for an event in case they hadn't added it to their calendar. Now, if you are sending multiple registered communications in the same journey, build out a message expiration process so late registrants don't receive outdated reminders. For example, you want everyone to receive the registration confirmation email upon registering, but dated communications like a week out email should not be sent to anyone who registers the day before the event. And while I know that a message expiration feature doesn't currently exist in CIJ, it's on the roadmap, and we found a few workarounds for this in the meantime. So my favorites are using an attribute branch based on the event start date in a trigger-based journey, or using the series feature in a segment-based journey. So when building register communications, you'll also want to account for cancellations by adding the native cancellation link to all your registered emails and including the registration cancel trigger as an exit condition in your registered journeys. Additionally, build a trigger-based journey that confirms when someone cancels their registration to avoid confusion. This gives registrants the option to cancel, and it gives them a lot more autonomy in their registration experience. And it helps keep your event engagement information up to date and accurate. Okay, so now on to stage 3 of communications, and that is the post-event follow-up. So post-event communications allow you to send tailored messaging. For example, if you attended session A, you could send a deep dive asset and a call to action to meet with sales for that specific audience. Or if someone registered but didn't attend, you could send the recording and an alternate date to attend the event or a getting started guide to get them up to date. But if you know you're going to send post-event communications to a group, so for example, a survey to all attendees, I would recommend automating as many as you can ahead of the event. You'll want to give yourself time after the event to pat yourself on the back instead of heading just straight back into work. And then I know it's impossible to plan for everything when it comes to events. I've never been able to do that. So when logistics change, you can use lightweight one-off journeys to the exact audience you need. So those are going to be segment-based with just a single email. And an example would be if parking instructions are updated, you could send out a quick email to everyone registered for a specific event or session that needs to access that parking structure. Okay, so the event record centralizes everything: the agenda, speakers, room, capacities, and key configuration settings. And the event record is where you're going to make important decisions that shape your entire event experience. So as you can see on the right in this slide, when you consider both venue management and event capacity, it might make you realize that you want to enable the waitlisting feature on an event record. Now, this is a really powerful feature, but I will say it's not a simple toggle. If you use waitlisting, you'll need to plan for additional communications, including a message confirming someone has been added to the waitlist, a message notifying them when they've been moved off the waitlist and into the event. And then additionally, you'll need to add filtering logic in your registered journeys to avoid sending your registered communications to people who are still waitlisted. That can cause a lot of frustration. In the second example, you'll see that if you have sessions within your event and you're looking at the registration experience, this might lead you to deciding that you would like to set up session level registration instead of just event level registration. Now, session level registration lets attendees sign up for specific sessions within the event. Additionally, you can also require session selection. So someone has to select a session. They can't just register for the event. Or you can even limit registration to a single session only. So between session 1, 2, and 3, someone would have to pick one. They couldn't register for all of them. One thing I want to highlight here is that while some events might technically have sessions and agendas, not all events need session level registration. So I would recommend that you use session level registration primarily when your room capacity constraints matter, when the sessions include workshops, labs, or limited seat experiences, or if you are tracking attendance for something like CE credits, that can be very strict. Session-based registration and attendance can be very helpful for that. Otherwise, I would say keep registration at the event level. You can always display the agenda on the registration form or in your emails or on your website. And then you can let attendees choose which sessions they attend on the day of the event. And then finally, on the event record, if you're thinking about the registration experience, you can use the registration period feature to set open and close dates for registration. And what this does is it eliminates the need for someone to wake up and perfectly time the form going live when registration opens, or someone maybe forgetting to close registration and turn off the event, and registrations coming in even after the event has ended, which seems shocking, but always seems to happen. And so this registration period feature allows you to both open and close registration at specific times. Okay, so a smooth check-in sets the tone. With efficient, streamlined tools, attendees can move fast and your staff stays stress-free. When it comes to check-ins, a line at the beginning of an event can often cause a lot of stress for staff, and it can affect the experience for attendees. Now, for virtual events, you might not have a line, but you still want to capture check-ins. And so for virtual events, specifically the ones that are using the native Teams formatting, you can include the dynamic check-in link in confirmations and reminder emails. So the native functionality can work its magic and map attendance cleanly back to your registration list at scale. And that help means that you don't have to manually export the Teams attendance data and match it. Makes it much smoother. Now, when it comes to in-person events, there's 3 options that we use and recommend. The first would be a manual check-in in Dynamics. So within Dynamics, you can open the event record and navigate to the registration list, and then you can just manually check and click a check-in button, and it will just check in whoever you have selected on that list. And this is a great option for low volume events, or if you have a lot of volunteers with computers. It kind of replaces the idea of 10 different people having a spreadsheet and they go and highlight your name. This is a great option. For larger events, though, this could still cause a bit of a line or a wait period for checking in. So the second option we have is using the native QR codes in your confirmation and email reminders. So what you do is within your confirmation emails, you can insert the QR code element, and then you would link it to the event registration code. And this means that each registrant receives a unique QR code in their email. And so on the day of the event, you can have prompting for registrants to open up their phone, find the email and the QR code, and then on-site staff can have the Dynamics 365 mobile app, which is free, and you can add a check-in within the app, and then that check-in will scan the attendee's QR and populate all the details of that person's registration, and then the check-in record is created from there. And I like to think that this is a nice, fast way to replace someone like adding just pen and paper signing in and then having to convert that later on. Okay, and the third option is if you're trying to be the most efficient, that would be using the Coffee and Done Check-in Pro app on a mobile device. So with this app, it's a little bit different than using the Dynamics app. This is an app specific to check-ins. You start by selecting the event you want to check in for. You can then have a dashboard, as you can see, that will tell you the number of registrants, the number of attendees so far, the percent of people that haven't checked in, the percent of people that have checked in, etc. And then from there, you can navigate to either a list of registrants. So if someone can't find their QR code, you could easily hop over to that list, type in their name, find them. Or if they have the QR code readily accessible, you can scan that QR code using the camera function of your phone or your tablet or whatever device you're using. And so this kind of links the two options together. You have both the list view as well as the QR scanning capability. And so what happens is this system allows you to then confirm a positive check-in on the phone. You can confirm name, everything you need. And then that check-in record just writes back to Dynamics immediately. So it's fast, reliable, and eliminates the paper trail. And I paused a lot to talk about attendance because Events are a part of a marketing system, and that's great. But then you want to really make sure that you are driving personalized follow-ups, and clean attendance allows for that. And that's more for if you're using sales or the CRM for any other functions. And it just creates a better attendee experience end to end, in my opinion. Okay, so I know I've given you a lot, but what are the big things to leave today with? So my number one thing would be that you want to make registration easy and flexible. I'm mostly talking about the registration form here. Only ask for what you really need. Don't add fields that don't really matter for the event specifically. And if there are fields for your CRM that you would like to capture for the contact, maybe actually use a touch point later on. So maybe after the event, if they're submitting a survey, you can add additional questions there instead of during the registration process. Using pre-fill is very helpful to make registration streamlined. So don't forget about pre-fill. And yeah, that would be my number one recommendation. My second recommendation or best practice would be to automate everything you can. I know that planning ahead can feel very overwhelming if before the event you're so focused on the invitations that you might feel overwhelmed trying to think of the registered communications and even the post-event communications. But if you can think of them as an end-to-end journey early on and get them all set up, it means that you have a lot more time to actually run the event as you get closer to the event and post-event, which just frees up a lot of time for you. And I think that's really great. And then my third best practice would be to think through all of the possible experiences. So I don't know if you noticed as I was talking through communications, there are a lot of scenarios when you think about registered communications, invitations. For example, when you send invitations, you're sending them to an audience, but you need to keep in mind that as that audience registers, they don't want to receive invitations anymore. They're receiving registered communications. You really have to create this map of everyone's experiences and all of the different touch points and routes that they can go throughout the event process. And so while it's easy to think of just the invited to registered to attended pipeline, you also want to think of the waitlist experience. So waitlists count as registrations, but they don't want to be receiving registration confirmation emails. So they'll have different experiences than people who get in right away. Cancellation experiences. It's nice to allow people the option to cancel if it's a paid event. They'll definitely want to cancel. If it's a free event, it's just a kind thing that they can do to help you. But often if canceling is very manual and requires calling or emailing in, people won't want to do that. And it can cause a lot of frustration when they try to and don't succeed. So if you build out that experience really, really well, even though they're canceling and not attending your event, it gives them a really great touch point with you. And then also the no-show experience. So it is okay if someone registers for an event and can't make it, but you want to make sure that you don't forget about them. It's great to thank people who attended, give them resources, but for someone who doesn't attend, you might want to send a specific survey asking why, were there logistical issues that can help you further your event in following years or future events. And it can also help you learn why someone didn't attend, and just really allow someone who might have had a frustrating experience a time to kind of let you know. And I think sometimes if people are given that opportunity, then they actually leave that touch point feeling a lot better than if they don't feel like they were heard or recognized. And then additionally, sometimes people can't show up, but they still really want your materials or the resources that you provided. And so that's always a very thoughtful thing for people who register but didn't attend to send them those. And so again, just to summarize this best practice that I'm mentioning, like these are all touch points that help you put your best foot forward during the event experiences, especially ones that can be frustrating for registrants. Okay, and then the last best practice would be to finish strong. So post-event is where short-term action becomes long-term values. So don't forget thank yous, recaps, specific call to actions, plus surveys for targeted feedback. So this kind of ties into the third best practice that I was mentioning of thinking through all possible experiences, but it's focusing a lot more on post-event. You've captured your audience's attention. You've gotten them to attend an event or register for an event, or at least just know about an event. And so now what will you do with that moving forward? You can send information about future events, about the current event. You can pass off leads to the sales team and they can move forward with that. It's often an exhausting time at the end of an event because you've done all this work, but this is actually where you can really make an impact with your audience. Okay, so here's where I'm going to leave you with some helpful resources that we have available if you want to dive even deeper into events or the rest of CIJ. So be sure to check out Coffee and Done's blog, where we share insights across D365. We also have some other tools available like our Knowledge Hub. I know that I mentioned a lot of things like leveraging different tools within a journey to create expiration, since expiration tiles are not something that currently exist in Dynamics. We have some workarounds for that. I know I've mentioned trigger conditions and how adding exit conditions with triggers can be helpful across different event journeys. And I might not have dove in too deep into those because can become quite complex. We do have a lot of examples and step-by-step tutorials within our Knowledge Hub for that. And then lastly, if you scan the QR code, you can book a complimentary 30-minute consultation with our experts, kind of to help you decide where you are currently and what the future looks like for you with CIJ. So I'd like to say thank you for joining this session. I'm going to leave this up, but for a second, and then I'll just hop over to this. Yeah, thanks so much for joining, and can't wait to hear everybody's questions about events.